Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Grad Coach TV, where we demystify and simplify the oftentimes complex and perplexing world of academic research. Today, two of our seasoned dissertation coaches, David Fair and Alexandra Schaefer, will be talking about 7 of the most common mistakes that they see in introduction chapters, in dissertations, and theses. This discussion is based on one of the many posts over on the Grad Coach blog. So if you are writing up your dissertation, thesis, or research project, you'll want to check out the Grad Coach blog over at www.gradcoach.com/blog. Also, if you're looking for a helping hand with your research project, whether that's a dissertation, thesis, or any other formal academic research project, you might be interested in our one-on-one private coaching service. You can learn more about that and book a free consultation with one of our friendly coaches over at gradcoach.com.
So thanks for coming, Alexander. It's good to chat to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a little bit rainy and cold here on this side of the world near New York, but all is well here. And how about you, David? How are things?
Despite being in South Africa in the winter, it's a nice, sunny, happy day here. So we've been having a good time.
Awesome.
So today we're going to be talking about 7 common mistakes that come up during an introduction, right? And we all know the introduction is pretty important. It sets the basis or foundation. And so we really want to get into that.
So I think, we find as grad coaches, as dissertation coaches, you and I, we see a lot of the same kind of common mistakes that oftentimes happen because as graduate students or other kinds of students, we're never explicitly taught what to do. You kind of learn through practice, through experience, getting feedback from your markers. And so I think that what we're going to do today is to really kind of alert you as the viewer and the student to what to avoid, and maybe give you some ideas for how to avoid those and what to do instead.
So common mistake number 1, and this one comes up, it's really about the lack of context for the study being provided, really not giving your audience or reader enough information about your project and where it's situated. So maybe you can give us some tips there as well.
Absolutely. This is one that we see frequently, hence it being a common mistake. But I think what often happens when we're doing our own research is that we get so focused, I'm setting up the idea here, but we get so focused on knowing what we're doing in our own head that sometimes we don't necessarily give the reader what they need to understand what's going on. And part of that is outlining the contextual factors that need to be discussed in the beginning. So rather than jumping right in and assuming that your reader knows what you're talking about, you need to actually lay some groundwork and tell them, what's the important background information? How where does this study come from? What is the observation? What's happening in real life that is motivating this? So you need to show why the topic is timely or important. So sometimes what we can see for this is maybe something in the news or an academic debate, or right now we're seeing a lot of studies having to do with COVID-19. So making sure that you are really contextualizing your topic, giving that background information, and giving the reader those tools that they need to engage with your work right from the get-go.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And specifically to that first point that you made there about you've got to give enough background information, and we get caught up in what we're thinking. My supervisor would always say that to me during my PhD. You can't expect everyone to know how an ant's immune system works, right? So we get so caught up in that. So providing that background is great. It's also really helpful, I think, to look into what industry, region, or field you're working in as well, because not everyone is going to be reading your thesis. It's going to be from your discipline. So having a broad enough introduction can be really helpful for that. And as you said, timely topics are great.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I think that's really great what you're saying too, is, even from the beginning, when you contextualize your study, you can be showing the reader how this is relevant. You do that more as you build on the introduction, but definitely right away, like what you're saying in the industry, like why is this important?
Okay, so mistake number 2, insufficient justification for the research topics and aims. And this is a doozy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We find this, for me, at least personally, is the biggest intro mistake that I come across, is absolutely not getting why it's important. So what can we do to avoid this one, Alexandra?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I see this one a lot. And I think, historically, as a student, just speaking as a student, we often think that our own work, well, it's justified because I'm doing it. Okay. Or it's justified because it hasn't been done before. That's a big one. It hasn't been done before. And you can understand when you're first starting out doing research, why that kind of reasoning of it hasn't been done before might sound attractive, but it's not enough. And I see that one all the time. So some of the ideas that you need to have in your justification for your research topic and your research aim, there are 3. So the 3 that I would point out are: what is the novelty of the project that you're working on? What is the actual importance? Not in your mind, of course it's important in your mind as the student, but what is the bigger research, or even theoretical or teaching? What is the bigger importance of it? And always end with an example of that. So if we can come back to the novelty aspect, it's easy to say, well, it's novel because it's never been done before. But that's not enough justification. Like I was saying, you need to look at what has been done before to see what previous researchers have said still needs to be done. And that's one of the best ways that you can see if something is novel, is, well, what have previous researchers said? If I'm reading these articles, novelty. So for instance, I talked earlier about COVID. It's not enough just to say, well, COVID is happening and we should research it because it hasn't been done before and COVID is new. What exactly, how has COVID impacted your area of study? What is a problem that COVID has impacted? Really narrowing that justification. And then the second one, like I said, is the importance. What is the importance of the research? This is what you'll express in your research topic and aims is, if this study is not done, or if this research is not done, what will the negative consequence be? In contrast, if this is done, how can this help? What is the actual real life importance of this project? And it's not enough. Another, I know that this seems like a lot. Like I already told you why, I've explained it, but just explaining that too, readers come with such different backgrounds and experiences. It's good to give a specific example of what you're talking about. So either referencing a study that was done or referencing a real life example. If you have those big 3 aspects of novelty, importance, and give a concrete, very specific example, that will do a really nice job of sufficiently justifying your research topic and aims.
That's great. I think you've hit some really good points there. Novelty, importance, and an example. Mm-hmm. I think another way that we can always put this is the what, the why, and the who, yes. Which is, what am I researching? Why is it important? Mm-hmm. And who benefits or is going to struggle as a result of it not being done or being done? Right. And so for me, I find that's super helpful in this kind of framing. And as you say, providing that information, it might feel like a repetition, but it's really providing the justification for your research. Mm-hmm. And as you said, people are coming from all over the world, potentially reading your work, and they don't necessarily have the context that we have. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, more information is always better. And really a well-justified research topic and aim really makes your study just pow.
Totally. And I think that, David, as you and I as dissertation coaches, we can really see in some of the projects that we work with and coach, and the documents reviews that we do, is when someone justifies their topic really well, it's almost like, yes, you did it. Okay. So I think it really does make a difference. Absolutely.
All right, mistake number 3, when your topic is just too broad or not refined sufficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So this one comes up as well, where it feels like the project is researching everything or nothing and all of them in between. So it's super important to make sure your aim is focused and your research topic is focused, because a focused project really gets impact going.
Absolutely. And so I think what happens here when we go in with a broad topic is just like you said, something happens when we're doing our first big research project where we feel the burden of, I need to solve this problem. And something happens as you go along in your research and your career in academia. You start to say, okay, I as one person cannot solve this whole problem. And that's what research is and academia is. It's contributing to a larger field of research. Everyone is kind of working together to contribute to solving this problem or addressing this problem if we're not going to solve it. And so what we need to do, rather than keeping a topic that's very broad, is to think mentally, what is the one small piece of this that I can do, that I can feasibly do? So some of the ways that a topic can be narrowed is to, let's say we have a broad topic. I'll think of a business related example. The impact of telecommunication on SMEs. This is one that I see very common in my project. And that is a very broad topic because telecommunication has a lot of facets. So do SMEs. This is a hot topic at the moment, looking into different facets of SMEs. And so what you can do there is think about, okay, what is one aspect of telecommunication that goes into telecommunication? Maybe Zoom. How are SMEs using Zoom for business meetings? So just by doing that, by breaking down this broader topic, you've done a much more testable and researchable project. So that's what I would say is, if you have the broad topic, think about the different aspects of the broad topic and see if you can break down the broad topic into something smaller, into smaller pieces. And so I think that, if let's say we're going to do a research study on the impact of telecommunications in SMEs, the reader is going to say, okay, but what do you mean? What is telecommunication? What are SMEs? What exactly are you looking at? And so, David, you mentioned earlier thinking about the what, the who, the why. And so I think that this ties back nicely into that, is what exactly is it about telecommunication that I can research? I can look at Zoom. What is it about SMEs I can look at? I can look at business meetings, and I can marry the two together in a way that I can actually test. And then that leaves room for future researchers to take other aspects of telecommunication, other aspects of Zoom. And so that's one of the ways that you can take a broader topic and narrow it down.
I think that's great. As you say, it's really important to just make sure you're not looking at the entire forest, but your research is a single tree in that forest. And just to put it in other words, I always say context is key. Yes. In your introduction. And that's because in any research project, you can always specify further by adding in context. A classic one from the social sciences is to focus on a specific racial, ethnic, or cultural group and how that feeds into your research problem. Or in this case of businesses or business management, maybe you're looking at marketing. It's always about marketing in what realm? Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? Is it TikTok? And that makes such a difference for helping that topic to be focused. And it also means you don't have to read as much literature in your literature review, which is super helpful. All right, research problem number 4 for an introduction is a poorly defined research aim, objective, and research question. Now, disclaimer, this does come up in a lit review chapter in certain thesis structures, but I think it's an important one to cover here because without a clearly defined research aim and clear objectives and research questions, it can get a little murky, and that's really what we don't want in an introduction. So, Alexandra, how do we clear that water?
Well, exactly what you're saying. And again, this does come in the literature review chapter, but it, to underline that, it's often a good idea to maintain consistency and always be reminding your reader throughout your dissertation or your thesis or your project of the aims, the questions, the objectives. And so why these are very important, if we go from, okay, we've established the topic, we've established my scope area, my small context. What are we doing with those? What are we testing? What are we interested in? Who is this impacting? So really, this might be one of the most important parts of the introduction because it sets up the parameters and the expectations for the rest of your project. It is the guiding thread that goes through your whole project. And so how you formulate your research questions, objectives, and aims, it depends largely on your field, your topic, focus. But you also need to make sure that you are being very clear with what these are. So let's give an example of that. Let's go back to my example of telecommunication and SMEs. So we already said that as a topic is too broad. And in point number 3, we narrowed it down to being, more specific to the impact of Zoom on, I'm trying to remember my example here. The impact of Zoom on business meetings. There we go. Okay. And so in that, just having that small topic, while it is a very testable topic, what are you going to do with it? Okay. What exactly are you going to do? And so if you don't have a very clearly defined research aim, objective, and research questions, even if you have this great topic and you've narrowed down the scope, it's all for naught. So what you can do there is really think about, okay, what is it going even more narrow, even narrower? What exactly am I interested in testing about the impact of Zoom on business meetings and SMEs? Let's say, am I interested in seeing how Zoom allows for collaboration in a business meeting? Am I interested in seeing how Zoom can help, the Zoom breakout rooms, that feature of Zoom, what happens with these breakout rooms? So refining that. So what we need to do there is let's go with that idea. We're looking at breakout rooms in Zoom in SMEs. You really want to say, take your goal, your overarching goal there, and turn it into a manageable aim. So this project aims to investigate the impact of Zoom breakout meeting rooms on collaboration in SMEs. So just there, by narrowing that scope that minutely, the reader will know exactly what you're trying to do, and it also will help you. Now, what happens after that is you have to think, okay, what do I do with my objectives? So these objectives should be the very kind of testable breakdown of what you're going to do. So you need to go step by step of what am I going to really do in this project according to that aim. And those are your objectives. And then what you can do there is, okay, if these are my aims, these are my objectives, I want to come up with a question that mirrors those. So if my aim is to investigate the role of Zoom breakout rooms on collaboration in SMEs, my research question would likely be, what is the impact of Zoom breakout rooms and collaboration in SMEs? So doing it that way, making sure that they all align with each other, not only promotes clarity for your reader, but it promotes clarity for you. And it can be that guiding thread, like I said, throughout the whole rest of your project.
I think that's great advice. And as you say, you mentioned that key thread or that golden thread, and that's so important. Mm-hmm. So This is the one place where repetition in your thesis is actually well looked for, is bringing in your aims, objectives, and research questions at each point of your writing. Introduction, methodology, lit review, discussion, keep it there. Similarly as well, I totally agree with what you said in terms of making sure everything is well aligned. Your research aims should lead to your research questions. Your research objectives should be the specific steps needed to answer those questions and aims. And it's all about making that clear and well-defined. And I think the best way to do that, write them out, take a look, see if there's any aspect that feels a little unconnected, and then to take it a step further, give it to a friend who's not in your field and check if they can see that it all makes up. Because we get caught up in our own bias. That's part of being a researcher. So anything you can do to mitigate that bias is always great. Research mistake number 5 for your introduction that commonly comes out. And as Alexandra said, this is totally aligned to question or mistake number 4. And that's really the misaligned research aims, objectives, and research questions. Previously, we were talking about them being too broad. Now we're talking about them not matching up. So we can really just dive into that. Alexandra, how could we do this?
Yes, and so it's really difficult because when you're working on your research aims, objectives, and research question, like you said, not only do you have to worry about making sure that they are clear and focused and defined in a way that the reader can understand it, but sometimes we see it happen that a research aim is looking at one thing, the objectives are a little bit different, and then the research question is over here. And that's indicative of almost 3 different studies. And so exactly, we see this a lot where these 3 aspects aren't cohesive. And this is a killer for the introduction, and it sets a bad precedent for the rest of your project if they're not in line and uniform and in harmony, we can say. So what I would do there, and I mentioned this a little bit for point number 4, is to, and I like what you said, David, about writing them down. I think that's nice to have a visual for it. So first, for me, I always start after I've developed the scope and the context for a project. I like to think about what am I trying to do? What is the thing that I'm trying to do according to this? Where's my little piece of the pie in this? And so that's the research aim. And what's really nice about your research aim is this can be pretty, how do I want to say this? Pretty formulaic. There's kind of a standard that you use when you write about your research aim. You'll see things like this project aims to, or this project seeks, or this project will investigate. There's all these starting phrases that can really motivate the rest of your aim. And so the research aim can often be a little bit more abstract, meaning you don't know exactly how you're going to test it. So let's say, going back to my example, this research aims to investigate the impact of Zoom breakout rooms on collaboration in SMEs. That's my aim. Now I have to think about, okay, what are the actual testable, almost like a to-do list of objectives. So what you can do is break down that research aim in a way where it's almost a step-by-step of what you're going to be doing for this research aim. And so in order to get those objectives, they come from the research aim. So they need to align with the research aim. You can't suddenly be talking about Skype and social media. You need to stay talking about your topic. And then the really nice thing, as I mentioned, the formulaic aspect of the aims, doing the research question, at least the overarching research question, is also pretty formulaic. I like to tell my clients, take your aim and put it in a question form. That's pretty straightforward. And, it doesn't always work, but it works a lot of the time. So what is the impact of Zoom breakout rooms on collaboration in SMEs? Okay. So we know that here's the statement of the aim, and here's the question of the research question. And in the middle here, going down, are the objectives. And doing so, it almost forms an upside down triangle where you have aims, question, objectives, and they're all within their little triangle together. So going back to your idea of writing it out, I'm a visual person, so I like to make shapes.
That's great advice. And really, it is about just putting it out there and looking at it objectively. One of the other places I see this coming up is when your research is developed, and like any research project, things evolve, things change a little bit, you identify things. So really make sure you come back to this after you've collected data and explored things, and just make sure that you aren't just going off on a tangent, that you realign everything to be as it should be. However, if it's changed way too much, then obviously definitely chat to your supervisor about that. Don't surprise them. But broadly speaking, it's about getting that clear alignment. You want to make sure that the research aim matches to the objectives, matches to the question, and then it's all a nice triangle that we can then use. And what's also nice about the triangle is it does make that point of us focusing on a specific research problem, which is always key, and it's been related to our previous questions as well. Okay, so the sixth issue we frequently see with introductions is a lack of scoping or justification for the chosen scope. So Alexandra, how can we scope out this issue?
Yes, so, even though when we do research, we want it to be generalizable, we want it to be applicable to different contexts, straight away, it's not inherently going to. We come from our own research context. We're in our own universities that have their own characteristics. And so even though the goal of research is to make it generalizable, what you need to do first is indicate your scope. And now scope is to really talk about the where, the when, the who, going back to your WH questions. So what oftentimes we see is I'll see research questions or research aims that are quite broad, but in the other parts of the introduction or in the objectives, we don't know exactly where the researcher is testing these things. Who are they testing them on specifically? What kind of industry or setting are they in? And so it's really important to show, okay, here, even though I want this to be generalizable, here is where I'm coming from as my researcher with my topic. And in doing so, this will later on allow other researchers to say, hey, I could test this in my setting too. And eventually all of those will add up together to really contribute to that research aim or that topic. And so let's talk about, I keep coming back to this example. I think it's important so that the viewers can see, how this goes along. So this idea of testing Zoom, the impact of Zoom breakout rooms on collaboration in SMEs. Which SMEs? What industry of SMEs? What country are the SMEs? Is this a startup? Is this, who is in charge of this? And so you need to really say, yes, I'm looking at Zoom breakout rooms in SMEs, but specifically I'm looking at SMEs in the financial sector, let's say banking. I'm looking at a company that's been active for 5 years. They're located in Saudi Arabia, for instance. Some of the things that their mission statements are XYZ. So these are all things that can really help drive your study and show that here is my scope that I'm looking at, which in doing so really makes your project more testable and more doable too. But then it allows future researchers who may read your study and say, oh, I could test that too. We have similarities in my setting, and they can do it in theirs. And so having a well-scoped topic not only helps you as the researcher, kind of have that structure, know what to do, stay within that box that we've talked about, but it also sets a precedent for other researchers in different settings when they are trying to narrow their scope. Okay. And then, going back to the justification for why you've chosen that scope, why are you looking at this specific or these specific SMEs? What is it about these SMEs that is worth studying? What is it about being within these SMEs in Saudi Arabia? Going back to my example, what's going on in Saudi Arabia with SMEs? So you really need to justify why you're doing that. And one of the ways that you can justify it is giving those examples, but also looking at previous studies that were done before yours to see kind of if they said, this is as far as we got in our study, and now future studies need to look at this. And so that's really what the importance of justification is for your scope too.
Yeah, great points. I think pet peeve of mine as a researcher is when you're reading a paper and you can't find out who the population sampled is and why the research happens. So it's definitely a key aspect. And as you said, exploring those who, where, and when questions are also great because it puts your research into context and gives it sort of a place. And as you said, going back to previous research is also great in terms of, has any research been done on this group before? If it has, that's important. If it hasn't, that's part of your justification. But remember, it can't just be that it hasn't been done before. It's got to have a little bit more. And so, for instance, your example of the Saudi Arabian SMEs, Zoom and banking, maybe there's something specific about Saudi Arabia's policy or their business mindset, or maybe that specific banking industry has very strong security worries. And so bringing those contexts in really helps push your research further and also helps, going back to our previous sections on your topic being novel and defined and focused. All right. Introduction mistake number 7, the last one. And fittingly is often at the end of your introduction, no overview of your document structure. Why is this important to even include it? It's going to be in the next section anyway. Alexandra, what can you say?
So, as myself, of course, but as someone who is quite analytical and quite a structured person, having this kind of structure can only help you as the researcher and definitely helps your reader. And so at the end of your introduction, it's really important that you have a summarizing paragraph or section where you really lay out what the purpose of each part of your project is, including the introduction. Even though you've just written the introduction, it's important to still say the purpose of this introduction chapter was to da-da-da. In this chapter, the researcher, or if you're in a more informal program, I wrote about da-da-da, and you talk about the contents. In chapter 2, the literature review will be presented. The purpose of the literature review is to da-da-da. So following that structure of this is what the chapter topic is or goal is, here's the purpose of it, here's what is going to be included in that, it almost prepares the reader for what's to come. And sometimes when we see introductions that don't have this document structure, it feels very abrupt and very almost disparate chapters, disparate things happening. Like here's chapter 1, here's chapter 2, here's chapter 3, rather than here in chapter 1, I did this. The purpose of this was to motivate or introduce chapter 2, the literature review. And then building on the foundation of the literature will lead to my study, which is addressed in chapter 3, whose findings will be detailed in chapter 4 and later discussed in chapter 5. So having that way, it feels very, going back to my earlier word, harmonious, and there's flow. And having that flow, it can be tricky to get, but doing things like having the document structure at the end of your introduction chapter will allow you to know, okay, it almost gets your head screwed on right, saying, okay, remember, this is this chapter. I'm doing this in this chapter. Then it goes on this chapter. Because your project, whether it's a thesis, dissertation, or any other kind of culminating assignment, it needs to all go together. It needs to be the same story. And so I think that it's such a small thing if you think about just the summarizing paragraph of the document structure at the end of your introduction, but it does a lot for you to prepare, and it does a lot for the reader to know what's to come. And so it's not difficult to do, but it is a mistake that happens often because it seems so simple, such a throwaway thing, and it's not at all.
Yeah, I think you've raised really great points there, Alexandra. And one thing to add to that is not everyone who's reading your thesis, unfortunately, will read your whole thesis. Many people will jump in at your introduction and your discussion and take that, or your introduction and conclusion. But for someone who might be interested in what methodologies you used in your research, they don't want to really go through the whole thesis. And so for researchers, it's also really helpful for you to have that structure. And as Alexandra said as well, it really helps with that flow between chapters. It acts as a transition between your introduction into your lit review. And then if you can keep those transitions going, it makes for a really strong, cohesive dissertation, thesis, or culminating project. Because nothing is worse than a project that just feels like 7 separate documents that have just been loosely Control-C and Control-V'd into place. So definitely a good point. So thanks so much for coming, Alexandra. And I think it's been really helpful in giving us sort of a quick blow-by-blow of 7 mistakes that come up in an introduction.
Well, thanks so much for having me, David. This was really fun. And, you know, being a dissertation coach has really been a fruitful job for me. I can call it a job, but I really enjoy doing it and helping students, because I've been in the shoes of a lot of these students of feeling, what am I supposed to do? Feeling like I should know what I'm supposed to do. And so if we can help at Grad Coach with some tips and tricks, that's a great validation.
All right, so that pretty much wraps up this episode of Grad Coach TV. If you're wanting to learn more about the introduction chapter, about writing the introduction chapter for your dissertational thesis, be sure to check out the Grad Coach blog over at www.gradcoach.com/blog. Also, if you're looking for a helping hand with your research project, be sure to check out our one-on-one private coaching service, where you can work with a personal coach just like David or Alexandra, and they'll help you step by step through your research project. If you're interested in that and want to learn more, you can visit gradcoach.com, where you can find all the details and also book a free consultation with one of our friendly coaches. So that's all for today. Until next time, good luck.